Hello, everyone. My name is David, and I'm about up to here with all the stuff that's going on between the races, the different nationalities that's here in America. It's not just blacks, it's not just Hispanics, the Spanish people. It's not just about the Asian culture. It's not just about the Islam or one to the other. The biggest discrimination going on in the world is against the poor. I don't care what your race and nationality is. There are people that are discriminating just because you're poor. Now, most people look at me and they see a white man. Well, I have my DNA done, and I am 5 points below that of being a Native American. 5 points below that. But yet, everybody looks at me and they see just a white man. You see a beard, gray hair, and you think that I grew up as a privileged person. There was no privilege ever given to me. I was born a poor white man in America. What that meant that I was poor, dirt poor. Therefore, I was dumb and stupid. Every school I went to treated me this way. No matter how much I would try to do, it didn't make any difference. I remember one time in fifth grade, there was a teacher would take and stand us up in front and do the spelling bee. And I was always the first one to sit down in the spelling bee. Well, she had a teacher from another classroom come in and do the spelling bee again. But the other teacher was the one that gave it. Well, with the other teacher giving it, I won the spelling bee. I won the spelling bee. Why? Because my teacher considered me dirt poor, someone that traveled around throughout the state and was just did, didn't deserve a chance. So no matter what I said or done, I was wrong. She didn't like that. She didn't like me. That's how I was discriminated against. But it wasn't just in the classroom. If I wanted to do something, I had to raise the money myself. I had to go out and do whatever I could to raise the money. I didn't like to steal from people, nor did I like to take advantage of them. So I would do these little jobs that nobody else wanted to do. And most of the time when I did the jobs, I got my butt worked. Not by my family, but because somebody thought I shouldn't be doing that. I remember one time I was selling a National Gazette paper. I ain't going to tell you which one, but I was walking around selling them for a quarter a piece. That's what I was selling them for. I'd send 10 cents to the company for the paper, and I'd keep 15 cents for me. Only had 3 days to sell them, though, so I had to do a lot of walking. But I would walk around the whole town where I live, sometimes up to 25 miles in one day. And for a child that was just barely 10 years old, that was a long way to walk. Well, another child in the same neighborhood started selling it. He's from an upper class. Guess what? happened. That upperclassman got him and his friends together, and every time I came close to selling all my paper, he'd come up, beat the crap out of me, and take my money. This happened several weeks, going on and on. Finally, a policeman comes up and catches him doing it. I was the one that got in trouble. Why? Because I wasn't supposed to be out doing this. The other kid, he was just 9 years old. I was 10 years old. So I wasn't supposed to go out and sell paper, just him. But he's from an upper class family that supported the police officer, paid the policeman. I was a poor, dirty, dirt poor white boy. I was undersized for my age. I didn't have the strength to fight. Most of the time, I did just turn around and run. But this stuff like this happened all the time. But it didn't just happen in the white neighborhood. No matter which neighborhood I went in, I got my ass whooped. Only because I'm white. Yeah, I know blacks. They've had it rough too. They walk on the wrong side of the street. Yeah, they get their ass whooped. Well, I did too. I walk on the wrong side of the street and I get my ass whooped. I like to go fishing. And if I didn't go to the right pond and it was there full of blacks, I'd get my ass whooped. These are ponds out in the open for everybody. I couldn't go to the white ones because I'd get run off and my ass whooped. I couldn't go to the black ones. Where could I go? I was dirt poor. That's the way it was. My family barely could pay rent anywhere for too long. My father couldn't keep a job for too long because he was dirt poor. So when it come time to cut jobs wherever he's at, he was the first one to let go. He couldn't work for a contract company, doing contract work, painting, building, or anything like that because he too was dirt poor and everybody considered him dumb. He couldn't work for the government because the government said that he was too dirt poor. He couldn't afford the union fees or anything like that. He was dirt poor. Now, I understand about black tax because I've seen lots of things where um, black Americans, African Americans, whatever you want to call yourself, when they get success, they kind of reach back and try to help everybody else up. That didn't happen for me. I didn't have anybody pull me up. That didn't happen. I was so dirt poor till even in our family, I was segregated as being undersized, weakling, dumb, stupid, crazy. I was called a lot more things, but I'm not going to go there. I like to keep my mind a little sane. But I was dirt poor. But it wasn't just me. Even the African Americans, there was a part of them that was dirt poor. And even there, everybody looked down on and thinking of them as trash, not worth having or doing anything with. Same thing with Hispanic Americans. They were only good for farm work and doing scrap work that nobody else would. But then even the dirt poor of them didn't even get that. They were kicked and beat just like I was. It didn't matter if you was an Asian American, whatever you were. If you were dirt poor in America, you didn't stand a chance. Not with your teachers, not with the government, not with city, not with your teachers, not with anybody else. Nobody considered you worth doing anything with. only because you're dirt poor. Now, I think that's pretty damn sad. Yes, even the whites, they had their tax they paid where they reach back and they help others like themselves up. But you have to be worthy. You have to be one of them that was a standing athlete, bigger than life type of person to pull up to make it worthwhile. Or one of those so smart and so genius about things, and your family had to pay a certain amount of money. Yeah, they would help them up. Do you think there was any colleges came around offer me scholarships to go to college? Anybody coming around saying we'll help you with the education? The only one coming around was the army, but there was military, like all military for parole. I had to pay so much in order to get so much out, and by the time I paid anything in, I was let dirt poor. I mean, that's just the way it was. And then with the GI Bill to get education and stuff like that, I had to pay that back. I had to put money in it to get it, and once I got it, I had to pay it back. Yeah, I think that's pretty bad, don't you? So who's gonna pull me up and help me with my education? Well, I found little venues around everything. Like for my education, I couldn't go to a college or a university, but university had all these what they call auditorium type of classrooms where there's so many people coming in till they really didn't check everybody coming in. And those classes I could go to. I could sit down and I could take notes in a notebook about this or that. And I knew there were so many people I would never get called on. So I could sit back, take notes. Then I could go to the public library and look up and research these things. That's how I got my college education. I started with the GI Bill and I went into marketing and I found out when I changed my course that I had to pay all that back. Then I found out because it was on the GI Bill, major universities would not recognize my education. They would not accept it because the GI Bill would not pay for regular college tuition. It would only pay a small amount and not enough. So the person had to get other things to pay for a regular college education. I was just poor, working the labor hall, doing whatever I could here and there, um, just to get by, taking the worst and worst of all jobs, even as a custodian or cutting yards and stuff like that, or working as a scrap labor for carpenters, brick masons, things like that. I would just scrap labor. Why is scrap labor? Somebody they can use, and if they don't feel like wanting to use them for that day, they can just push them aside and not use them. But that's because I was dirt poor. In America, you can be one certain type of class of people. You can be poor and you can get help up. You can be middle class and get help up. You can take and be wealthy and get help going up. But when you're dirt poor, what that means, you have nothing. You will never own nothing. You will never be nothing. That's what it means. And it doesn't happen to just black Americans, African Americans, or any of the other ones. It only happens to dirt poor, no matter what. No matter what your race, nationality is. There is one other class that's even more lower than we are, and you don't hear about them that much because most of them been destroyed or their nationality, their native tongues, all like that been taken away from them. And that's the Native American that was here before any of us came over. You know, they talk about the blacks during slavery time. Well, most of us dirt poor, we come over and we have assigned an indentured servitude to a person that paid for our passages over here. What does that mean? That during that period of time, they were slaves too. They couldn't come and go and stuff like that. They were subject to be beaten. They were subject to be raped. Women, they were subject to be put out in the cold and have to do on their own. The living quarters, there was none for a lot of them. There was no way of taking care of it. You saw in Shirley Temple, I can't movie, I can't remember the name of the Little Princess, like that. She moves into this boarding house because the father has to go off to the service, and he has money. She gets all this and gets all that, and she feels so special. And others below her don't feel that special, so she tries to help them pull them up. But then something happens to her father, and he reported back to the boarding school. Oh, what happens to Shirley Temple? She gets pushed down to the dirt poor. All of a sudden, the money that was there to pay for her education and boarding there wasn't there anymore. And they didn't know what to do with her. So what did they do? They put her as dirt poor, having to work and do all these other little things. Where she was getting an education, she's not no more. She became an indentured servant. Yes, they did a little twist on it, made it look nice and all like that. But in reality, once you become an indentured servant, you're always are. Because at the end of the time of their service, the owners will come, well, you still owe me this and that. What are you going to do? And they have to find another time for me there. Even over in London now, if you were dirt poor, there was a prison for the poor people. You couldn't pay your bills, you couldn't keep things going, you was put in prison. Yeah, you could be put in prison. Other countries would do the same thing. If you're dirt poor, this is what happened to you. This happened to a lot of people. So if you want to know about the hardships in America, walk the streets without a penny in your pocket and watch what happens. There are metropolitan cities and towns where it is illegal for a person to be homeless and walking around with no money in their pocket. If they're walking around and a police comes up and they have no money in their pocket, they have a right to be arrested. It's a misdemeanor, but the person can be arrested only because, not because they ain't got ID, not because of causing trouble, because they had no money in their pocket. Yes, even in America, that is there. That is discrimination, dirt poor. Imagine you going to buy a loaf of bread. Now, a loaf of bread can run anywhere from $1 up to $3 a loaf. But now imagine all you got is a quarter, and you go into a store and you cannot even use a quarter to buy a piece of a loaf of bread or a bun, a roll, or something like that that you can eat. You cannot anymore in America. You need to have at least $2. I would say $1, but then you got to have taxes on that. So you need at least $2 to buy just a loaf of bread. And if you got $2, there's other things you're gonna buy before then. But that's only for one day if you buy that. Potted meat and some crackers or soda crackers, something like that to eat with. I'm sure that's the same thing the Salvation Army and stuff will give you to eat. But you have to understand, even Salvation Army has a limit. All the churches that take in these homeless people have a limit. What happens to the rest of them? Think about LA and what's going on there with all those homeless people out there on the streets. That their cost of living there just to be homeless is so high and astronomical. It doesn't pay them to go to work. It doesn't pay them to try to get a temporary job anywhere. Because if they did, first thing the employer's going to say, where do you live? And the person's going to either give a fictional address, and employers are aware of these fictional address, or you're going to give them false information about real address, and you're not going to be there and know anything about it. And the employer's going to find out about it later on anyway and fire you. And then you tell them you're living on the street, they're not going to have anything to do with you. Get a place to live, you come back and see me, and I'll put you to work. You can't go to the place to live because you have no money. You have no money, so you can't get a job. Dirt poor. Discrimination. These news people are talking about all the trouble that Simone Biles went through. I relate to her. I know the things that she goes through. Not personally what she's gone through, because yes, she's had to perform at a higher level than what most champions have, but then again, she's gone longer than most champions have too. Just like Serena Williams has. She's gone a lot further for a woman, and she's had to work twice as hard, triple. Women have it worse than men do. I have to admit that. If you're a dirt poor woman, it's just like that song Patches. They're going to wind up finding you in the muddy river below because there really was no hope for you. Or talk about the shoeshine boy who winded up floating and face down in the water because he was dirt poor. Or other songs that talk about people being dirt poor. You know, there is a discrimination, a big one going on. You talk about George Foreman, and the Black Lives Matter. It does matter. It really does. But don't forget all the other lives that matter because of being dirt poor. What are you going to do later on in your life? These kids that are committing suicide and crimes and stuff, some of them have no choice because they're dirt poor. They're not going to get up in the world. They're teachers and everything, not going to pay attention. They're not big athletes like some. And so they're going to wind up dirt poor. They have no real hope or outcome. And rest of the world in society just locking them up. And they say, fine, at least I got a roof over my head and food in my stomach. I might get my ass whooped, but at least I know I get my ass whooped there and I'm going to be all right. Here, I get my ass whooped and I'm liable to wind up in a gutter somewhere dying, and nobody's going to pay attention to me. So why not break the law? Take a chance, take what I want. Form a little gang. All you dirt poor people, form a little gang. We're going to do our own thing. Of course, gangs based upon communistic society where only the strong survive, and again, the dirt poor and the cheapest of them, well, sure, you got to break laws, but what's a few laws? You're going to wind up in prison anyway. You have no choice. When you take hope away, and that's what's happening in the world, is you take hope away from the dirt poor, what they're going to do is just stop working. And when they stop working, they still going to find some way to eat. They're going to find some food along the road. They'll be the one digging in the trash bins and things like that, but they will do it because they're dirt poor and they're hungry. That's the other thing. The worst pain that any human being could ever feel on this earth. I don't care how many legs you break, how many times you get shot in the head, no matter how many kidney punches you get, whatever. The worst pain, even worse than a toothache could ever be, is a hunger pain. And if you don't believe me, you go a few days without eating and see what happens. There's some girls that have, and men have eating disorders. They actually learn how to turn off that pain for hunger. But that is the worst pain. You don't believe me? You go a couple of days without eating. You can learn to turn off that hunger pain, but it's still pain and the worst pain you could ever feel. The dirt poor feels it so much till it becomes part of their normal life. They don't think about it anymore. Anyway, that's about all I can say about it. Talk about discrimination. How many times have you looked at somebody holding up a sign saying they needed help? And I mean the real ones, not the fake ones out there, but the real ones needed help. And you pass them by. After all, they're dirt poor, aren't they? As David said, let's get real, people. Let's get real.